In this series, let's look at what I call the combo packs in Tableau. When you have a measure on a chart in Tableau, by default you plot only one item. What if we want to combine two different numbers, for example, sales and profit together? There are a number of situations where this is useful. So let's look at what is possible in Tableau. There are two terminologies often used in Tableau. One is called a side-by-side kind of a chart, like you have a side-by-side bar which displays two numbers as two bars, like sales and profit next to each other, or you have side-by-side circles and stuff. The other option is what's called dual line, where you have two lines, one plotting, let's say, a sales and another one plots a profit, or you could have a bar and a line combined together. So these are the two different types of ways to combine this. So in this part one, let's understand what happens when you put two measures in a single view by default. Both these options, side by side as well as dual charts, they are not the default. Tableau does something else which by default, and which is quite surprising for most of us who have come from some other tool, but it is quite useful as well. Then we will come to these two special cases in later videos. So here is what Tableau does by default. Here I've plotted both sales and profit. So here the way I've created this chart is, originally it was just sales just by segment, and all I did was just double click on profit, and Tableau added it at the bottom. Yeah, so just notice what's happening to this marks card as I am clicking back and forth. So you have one marks card that is for this bar. When I double clicked on profit, now look at how many marks cards are there. So now we have something called all as a marks card, and then we have something called sum of sales, and then we have a profit. So we have three marks cards. The wisdom of this is this. So each marks card, you can change the property individually. For example, profit alone I want to color in a different way. Yes, it is possible. And if you're crazy enough, you can fiddle with other things also, which I don't suggest anyway, just for playing. But yes, you could selectively turn on labels in one of them if it makes sense and stuff. Yeah, so that is with respect to each marks card. You can combine them, customize them individually. But if you want, you could also control them together. For example, if I want to break both of them down, let's say by segment, now it is possible. So this is already segment is there, so I putting it on color. All it is doing is just coloring each one of them separately. So instead of putting both of the things, for example, if I put category on color, now both things are applicable. The stacking is happening on both sales and profit. If it works out, or if there are special cases, I could remove the stacking from one of them. So that's the whole idea of different marks card. So you could combine them together, you could combine them individually. So here, for example, I have a tooltip which is showing this under profit. Here I have a tooltip which says shows sales. I could put more things. For example, let's say I put profit ratio on this, and then you will be able to see profit ratio in both of them. Yeah, so those are the ideas that you could do. You are not limited to just two items only. So I could, for example, add quantity, which becomes a third item, and then there's no limit to this. And you could also do it in another axis also by turning the axis around, and this is applicable for any chart type. So let me just get rid of some of these items on color. This is let's say in default, right? I could change one of them to a different type of a line. It doesn't make sense here, but just demonstrating how this is working. So if I turn this around, it could actually make much more sense, right? So I'm seeing one of them as a line chart and one of them as a bar chart. So these are different ways where both sales and profit, they have their own axis. This is going from 0 to 150,000, and this is going from 0 to a million. And we could see them separately and clearly. But there could be cases where we want to put them together so that the line and the bar, they are kind of, next to each other. I don't have to move my eyes from here all the way up to there to see both the sales and the profit. How do I do that? So that is where the alternatives are coming into play. I just want to show you the alternatives, and then in later videos we'll cover them in detail. The first alternative, what is called, I take a single axis, so here from 0 to almost 1.2 million, and then plot both the numbers. So this will work obviously only if both can share the same axis. So if they have completely different types of measurements, one measuring volume, another one measuring, for example, revenue, then it's not going to work, right? So this makes sense for things like sales and profit and salary and expenses and whatnot, which share the same type of a measurement. So in this case, you could see the profit is here and then sales is here. Like we have seen in one of the earlier videos on measure names and values in tables. When it comes to tables, I've told you the same concept is applicable here also. We could see the familiar items. Measure names has two filters, say profit and sales, and then you have measure values bucket, which has these two numbers, and then measure names and values are in rows and columns also. Yeah, so we'll get into some of these details later, but this is familiar. This terminology that's used in Tableau for this kind of things, it's called a side-by-side something. So it is a side-by-side bar here. If you go to show me, you will see this is here. There is also a concept of a side-by-side circle. Yeah. So rather than putting them on separate axes like we have done here, so we have put them together. The other alternative is, rather than combining them in a single axis, since we have two sides, why don't I plot one on this side, one on that side? So that is the second axis chart here, which is plotting sales on its own independent axis and profit on its own independent axis. And the numbers can be, it does not have to tie in exactly. So here it's going from 0 to 1.2 million. Here it is 0 to 140,000. If you want, you can right click and synchronize them. So then sales, the profit will all go to the bottom. But in cases like this, it is probably easier if you allow them to be separate. If you just compare these two, in this one, there is only one marks card. And in this one, there are 3 marks card like the first alternative. So this is something for you to just keep in mind. In the detailed videos, we'll cover why and what is happening. Here is a view that combines all the 3 so that you could just take a look at how this looks, all 3 of them. So 2 measures by default, they are on their own axis. You will have to move the eyes up and down or side by side to compare them. If you want to put them together as one measure, then we have to use the bucket called measure names and measure values, and then they are in there. They work if 2 of the measures share the same type of measurements, hence can be plotted on the same axis. Whereas with respect to dual axis, we could give them 2 different types of axis, one measuring volume quantity, another measuring revenue. And then here as well as here, we have the ability to change the mark type. Here we are limited to both of them as bar, both of them as circle and star. Whereas here we could do. So when we want, if we just look at show me, this one side by side bar as well as side by side circle comes from this concept. And then the dual line comes from this concept, and bars and line, which is called dual combination, they also come from this perspective, right? Show me does not really list something of this behavior because this is also easily generatable in Tableau. Yeah, so in the next video, let's get into this concept first, because probably this is easier to understand, and then we will come back to this where we have already covered this with respect to tables in detail, but now we will look at it from the perspective of charts.